Okay.
You're so predictable.
Very good evening. Today is Monday, March 12th, 2012. The regular meeting of the City of Burnsville Planning Commission is hereby called to order. Commissioners, welcome. Nice to see you.
Good
Chris,
evening.
staff, welcome.
Thank you.
Members of the viewing and listening audience, we're glad you have joined us. Welcome. Commissioner Julich, because of work commitment, he cannot be with us today. We'll miss him. Our first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. The agenda includes item 2, consider approval of minutes for a previous meeting of February 13th, 2012. Item 3, public hearing, Fairview Development Company for a preliminary and final plat to be known as Arbors 2, and a planned unit development amendment for development stage approval to construct a senior housing facility located at the northeast corner of the Community Drive and Nicollet Boulevard intersection. Item 4, discussion, timing of chair and vice chair election. Item 5, other business. A, agenda for March 26th meeting. Item B, planning commissioners updates. And item C, adjournment. Commissioners, any change to the agenda?
None.
Staff,
None from staff.
do I hear a motion to
Second.
moved and seconded? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? It's carried 5-0. Item 2, consider approval of minutes for previous meeting of February 13, 2012. Any changes to the minutes? Any corrections?
None.
None that I see.
Staff?
None
Anything
from
change?
staff.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried 5-0. Item 3, public hearing, Fairview Development Company for a preliminary and final plat to be known as Arbors 2, and a planned unit development amendment for development stage approval to construct a senior housing facility located at the northeast corner of Community Drive and Nicollet Boulevard intersection. Mr. Slania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. We'll be reviewing a project brought forward by Fairview Development Company. This is a public hearing. It is a plat for a 2-lot subdivision and a planned unit development amendment. Concept stage for this site was given many years ago, prior to 2003, when the last overall Fairview Ridges amendment was done. This has always been slated for some type of senior housing. Staff's excited to see this project come forward. We've got a number of things to discuss, but it is a appealing project that fits into the development very well. The site currently, let me just give you an idea where what we're looking at. Portland Avenue here, Nicollet Boulevard to the south, Community Drive to the west. The YMCA sits to the north. This in total is 4.4 acres. The proposal would split the lot into 2 parcels, not quite, but near equal in size. The senior, assisted senior development would sit in this area. This would be known as Outlot A for future development. As I said, the site is located in the Fairview Ridges campus. It is zoned R3C PUD. The land use is consistent with not only the comprehensive plan, but also the previous PUD amendments for the Ridges campus. The campus was originally established in '74. There's been quite a few amendments from since then. I'm not going to go into all the detail, but most pertinent to this project is 2003, when all of the landowners within the campus looked at simply a campus study of the property. It discussed parking, transportation needs, traffic, stormwater, green space, etc. To give you an idea, the campus, I'm not sure even if I can get out this far, but the campus runs south of McAndrews Boulevard down to the intersection of I-35E and the Nicollet Inn sits to the south. Nicollet Avenue sits to the west, and Portland Avenue sits to the east. So it is a substantial size neighborhood within the city of Burnsville. Specifically in 2003, the green space was discussed. The agreement between the city and the property owners was a 40% total green space requirement for the whole campus. This site specifically was slated for 64% green, which will be one of the topics we discuss this evening. Also in the 2003 concept, the land use was consistent, or is consistent, but it was designed, laid out conceptually as a one-lot development, with the senior campus running more east to west rather than using one lot and a future development. Again, that gets to the density of the site, traffic, green space, etc. When discussing the benefits and the deviations, this is a highly visible, great site within the Ridges campus. We're getting a high-quality building. The development of this currently undeveloped site is a huge economic benefit to Burnsville and the community. The use is very compatible and consistent with what is in the area. It is generally a low traffic generator as a senior housing. We've also discussed shared access and parking with the applicant, as well as pedestrian trail through the site. The two deviations I'd like to discuss are the subdivision of the lot into two parcels rather than one. That is not a zoning requirement, a zoning ordinance requirement, but rather an effect on the previous PUD, and the green space. Please note there are no performance standards. Parking is consistent. Landscaping, design of the building is all consistent with the ordinance. Outlined on page 2 of the report gets to the details of the site. Here is a site plan. I know it's difficult to read. I've got other images here. We'll start on the east side of the property. Here is the outlot for future development. There is driveway access, a right in, a right out along Nicollet Boulevard. Staff has indicated to the applicant we would not support access to Portland Avenue in the future, neither right in nor right out. We can get into the details of that. We have discussed with the applicant shared access out to Community Drive, so that people are able to get out to access McAndrews Road. Here is the subject site for tonight's development. The 3-story building sits in this area. Again, one access at this time. with a small surface parking lot. There are underground stalls that we'll see in some of the other images. Again, this is just lot 1, just the senior. Here is the senior building, and a better look at the parking layout, the landscaping. You saw a couple other images. This existing pond is not being altered or structurally affected by this design, and property lines are staying as is. Again, the PUD from 2003 required the 64%. The proposal in front of you here provides 50% green space. That is consistent with the zoning ordinance. In this zoning, R3C requires a minimum of 50% green space. The caveat is dealing with the larger Ridges campus and the agreements that were in place before getting to the higher 64%. The building perimeter green space is satisfied. The green space within the parking lot is all satisfied. The applicant has done a nice job of designing the lot. There are 49 stalls designed on site. 20 exist underneath. Excuse me. 29 exist on the surface lot. That exceeds the minimum requirement, so there would be 17 existing stalls with the current design for shared parking. Building materials. All the building performance standard requirements are met. It is a very appealing building, quality architecture, brick and block, EIFS. This does have some weight to it, but I'll pass along the material sample board so you can get a closer look at it. As I said, it is 3 stories. Here you're looking at the southeast elevation. This is the main entrance with a covered drop-off area for residents. When looking at the finished grade, the building, I believe, is 39 feet in height, 39 feet tall. There is, again, underground parking on one end of it, so obviously there is a greater height here. This is well screened and buffered from the street, so you're not looking at a lot of this masonry work. But again, there are many architectural details, not only horizontally but vertically to break up this building. It in total would have 64 residential units. Some of the amenities, obviously the commercial kitchen, the residential dining room. There's a chapel, a community room, a small salon in-house. All of those would be on the main floor. The remaining half of the main floor, second and third floors, are all the residential units. Let me jump just to 1 second to give you some other images of the site. Again, here's the site plan. There are 4 images following this. They work from the east side of the property looking west, then looking south, looking north, and looking east. So here's again the image looking across the vacant parcel to the building. Again, here's the entrance. The YMCA sits off to the right. Here you're looking south from the YMCA, if you will. You can see the pond off to the right. This is somewhat of an odd view because it's not typical unless you were sitting in the Y parking lot and could see through some of those trees. most of this will be landscaped and screened, but you can see the differentiation in the elevations and the detailing. This would be a view from the intersection of Community Drive and Nicollet Boulevard, looking north, looking northwest. Again, you can see a slight notice of the underground parking and the main entrance. And finally, if you're on Community Drive looking east, this is the image you would see. Sorry, give me 1 second here. The applicant's architect is here. Should we have questions on the design, certainly we can get into that. I did discuss parking briefly. As part of a benefit to the PUD, the applicant has agreed with shared parking and access with the future outlot. Please note this is conceptual. The future developer would not be bound by this, but it gives everyone a concept of what we're looking at. Again, without access to Portland Avenue here, the main access to Outlot A would be a right in, right out along Nicollet Boulevard. By connecting the future lot to the proposed lot, it would have the ability to then connect people to Community Drive, where they could go north to McAndrews or make a full access point, make a full full movement at Nicollet Boulevard and Community Drive. As part of a condition, the access and parking agreement was laid out. We'll get to the conditions in a minute, but there was Exhibit A was referenced in the report, and I just wanted to point it out to the commission. Again, as you saw in the landscape plan, the site is very well screened from all angles. There are significant pedestrian trails throughout the site. This was also a requirement of the 2003 PUD to help as a counterbalance, if you will, to some of the reduced green space, to help provide an amenity to residents of this building, employees, people in the neighborhood just using this site. It is well designed and consistent with the ordinance. There is minimal signage proposed for the site. There's no wall signage proposed for the building. The only sign proposed at this time would be at the intersection of Community Drive and Nicollet Boulevard, small monument sign indicating the residence. Lighting, screening of rooftop units is all consistent with the ordinance. Trash and recycling will be handled, stored in the underground parking and accessed by vehicles through the overhead doors on that end. So there's, again, no outside storage, no exterior or accessory buildings proposed at this time. Commissioners, if I could just direct you to the conditions laid out on page 6 of your background. Again, staff is supportive of this application. It's well designed, consistent with any number of documents the city has on file. Again, the key item here is the green space. From a staff standpoint, we certainly understand wanting to get density and efficient use out of land. It is difficult to weigh the benefits versus the deviation from that 64% that was established years ago. Staff is supportive of it with the access, the pedestrian trails, and so forth. At this time, Staff is recommending Outlot A be limited to 75% green space. That is a high mark, but with this number, it allows the city and the developer to have future negotiations. Is green space picked up elsewhere within the Ridges campus? How much shared parking, how much hard surface is really in need on Outlot A? Keep in mind, the Outlot A would need to be back in front of the Planning Commission, City Council, either way, for platting into a future buildable lot. It just gives us the chance to have those discussions. At this point, there is no proposal on the table. That may be a few years down the road. It may be many years down the road. At this point, we are not sure. So that is an adjustment that was made from your planning report. Certainly, the Planning Commission can discuss that. The applicant is just hearing of that percentage tonight. They may have comments on that as well. The other item I'd like to address is condition number 3. There are currently 17 stalls in access. That is not including this redesign with the shared access. So rather than trying to determine a specific number of stalls at this point, we know the proposed use will be assisted living. It's generally low in parking and traffic. Staff would just recommend the commission eliminate that specific number and leave the condition as is. And staff will work with the developer as we move forward with Outlot A to deal with those issues as they arise. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, the development team is here. We've got a representative from Kraus Anderson. From the realty side, the applicant's architect is also here. A representative from Fairview Ridges is also here if there are questions, more broad questions. It is a public hearing. Commissioners, I'll stand for any questions you have at this time.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lanier, for presenting the report. Commissioner Manhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, I have a few questions I'd like to just ask you, and if we can't answer, if you are not able to answer them, I will hold those and ask the applicant. Regarding the building itself, it's 64 units.
Correct.
Do we know what types of residents? Will they be ambulatory? Will they be able to walk around or drive or anything like that? Or are they, are they confined to the home? Or do you know what the...
I'll touch on that briefly. The applicant can get into more detail. It would be considered assisted living, so as we've calculated traffic and parking, possibly not all of the residents are restricted to the rooms or restricted to inside the building, but many are without care. We're assuming very few will have vehicles on site, very few will be leaving on their own with those vehicles.
Okay.
And I'll let the applicant go from there.
Great. Will the parking underneath be primarily for staff then, or?
Excuse me. It will be open to staff. It will also be available to the residents if there's a vehicle in the family that would need to stay there, or for any number of reasons a vehicle needs to be stored or something like that. They are offered to the residents first, but with their experience, it's often used for the employees.
Okay. You made mention that the trash pickup would occur in the lower level. Is that so? I'm assuming then that the doors are tall enough to serve a trash truck and other delivery vehicles?
They are. Let me jump to this image. I apologize, off the top of my head, I don't know the height of the doors. There are obviously elevators that access all levels down to the garage. There are recycling and trash storage areas down here. So whether the vehicle's actually entering the garage or the trash storage area is actually right near the overhead door. So whether that is moved by hand, I'm not sure. For larger vehicles, the semi trucks or what have you that can't access the garage or just it's not convenient, there is, you can see this sidewalk that enters through double doors into the commercial kitchen, into the storage room. So if need be, a vehicle can be placed there that's not blocking traffic or blocking the street for the major deliveries that aren't day to day.
Okay, will that, I'm just looking and imagining a service vehicle of some sort, hopefully not necessarily a semi, but
Certainly.
I would hope that they wouldn't be backing out into the street then after the deliveries, if that were
I
the case.
apologize. Semi was a wrong example. It has been designed so the fire department can get their full rigs through there
Oh, good,
with turning
good.
radiuses.
I'd like to just turn briefly to the other outlot. And
Certainly.
if you could have an image of that brought forward. Oh, either one of those.
I'll just
There, that's a good one. You were saying that this will be basically remain undeveloped until such time as some use is determined and brought forward. But that driveway off of Nicollet Boulevard will, that little turnout will remain. Is there any, I don't know how we typically handle curb cuts or turnouts like that that don't serve a specific use at a particular time, or they just kind of they just turn into grass then or something, or how do we handle that?
Sure. We do have a couple of locations where we do have existing curb cuts off of a street, kind of when they're put in place, and for future development, and then you don't have to go through and tear into the street when the development does come through. So there are quite a few locations in the city that do have that, and kind of our general policy on is that if they're existing, we kind of just leave them in place, and they do just kind of end up going into grass areas.
Okay. All right, but we will have the sidewalk crossing that point as shown on this aerial right now. Okay.
And if I may, Commissioners, just as a side note, the proposed development is accessing the existing apron or the existing curb cuts that is on site now also.
Okay. Chris, one last question for you at this time, and that is something that I brought up in discussions with you quite a while ago. I have occasion to go to other communities and sit in on public hearings and city council and planning commission meetings at other cities. And at one city that I was at, there was an issue brought up regarding a retirement community, an assisted living center, and it pertained to their septic systems, and they were requiring grinders on those septic systems for handling disposable diapers, anything like that may accidentally be flushed down the toilet. And I was curious whether our city staff had considered anything like that for this type of a facility.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I apologize, that isn't something we covered with the applicant up until this point. This is served by city sewer and water, so a specific septic system for this site wouldn't be applicable. I would ask the applicant to address that if that's occurred in other facilities, and we'll follow up with our inspections department.
Great. I know that the city that I'm speaking of had problems where it was clogging up their septic lines, and that's what prompted them to require that. And I wanted to make sure that we were able to understand that and be preemptive in dealing with that.
And it was a requirement of the city on the developer.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Commissioner Manhart. Commissioner Titan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few questions here. First one, I don't see any connections to the Y, and maybe it's just the nature of the residence, but it seems like
they're so close to the Y, why wouldn't they have some way to access the Y?
Certainly.
Is that discussed?
It was discussed, Commissioners, the main reason for that is the topography.
Okay.
Because of the grade changes that exist. Specifically, along this property line is some of the more steep slopes on the site. The building actually acts as a retaining wall to pick up the grades or make the parking lot and the lower level accessible for the underground parking. So one is the grades. Also, there's an existing sidewalk along Portland Avenue that connects with Nicollet Boulevard. And finally, at least conceptually, there would be a trail that connects along the north end of Outlot A so that you wouldn't necessarily have to go around the whole block to get to the Y. This would be somewhat of a shortcut to get you to Portland. With the grades and with the current parking scheme of the Y, the connection just wasn't pursued.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you thinking about it, though. Next question is about stormwater, and you mentioned there's a lot of grade, and I didn't see any stormwater plans in here. Is that going into the pond, or?
I would let Mr. Strelo address that. I know there were images in the
Oh, I must have.
packet, which we can find if we need to.
Maybe if you would want to, they have a landscape plan, I think.
Yes.
Maybe show you where. So they do have a couple of, the pond does act, the existing pond does serve partial needs for their stormwater treatment, but they also have 3 rain gardens on site. The one location is right there where Chris is showing. Then there's another one right on the northwest side, and then on the southwest side. So that those 3 areas are rain gardens, so they collect some of the runoff, and then they also have a underground infiltration system kind of in the southern corner of their parking lot in that area. So that kind of gets a lot of the parking lot. The rain gardens get a lot of the roof runoff. So they're with the combination of the existing pond and those practices, they're meeting the stormwater treatment requirements.
Okay, thank you. And going back to the height, can you pull up the 3D view from looking south from the Y?
Looking south from the Y would
Yeah,
be
that
this
one there.
image.
So, are those going to be residence windows?
Hold on 1 second. Yes, really, on this elevation, everything you see here would be resident windows.
Are those going to be screened from the parking lot from the Y for people looking in, and plus car lights?
The first 2 stories will be because of the grades. This actually will, as you can see here, sit in a bit of a hole. The 3rd floor, I would imagine, at least when the trees are planted, they are looking over the landscaping out to the YMCA parking lot. I don't see headlights being an issue, but they would have certainly a more bird's eye view of the YMCA parking lot.
So there's going to be
There are,
trees are going to be planted there.
again, I apologize for jumping back and forth. So here is the image we were, or excuse me, the elevation we were just looking at. I believe it's 30 to 40 feet from the building to the property line, with trees here. I am not sure if, the parking lot to the YMCA is just about to the property line, so any screening available is going to have to be planted on the subject site in between the building and the parking lot.
You know if those are conifers or?
They
Maybe.
are. Actually, I would ask the applicant.
Okay, I can wait and ask the applicant.
Yeah, look, if you don't mind, we'll get them up here.
And since you got the landscape plan here also, If they go with the outlot and the shared parking, it looks like they're gonna have to remove some trees and some shrubbery.
Yep,
Right.
correct.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should have them move that now so it stays there if they do connect that up. Is there any thought behind that?
Certainly, commissioners, I think that's something we can discuss. The connection is conceptual at this point, but obviously this is the closest point between the two lots. I'm sure the applicant will be agreeable to that.
If it happens in 5 years, we got 5 years of growth on a tree that we're gonna have to chop down
That's a good
and
point.
throw away. Just a couple more questions here. So when you counted the green space, did you include the parking lot green space
Correct,
in the 50%?
correct.
Okay.
The parking lot green space is counted. The pond is not because that is a separate parcel, just for clarification.
Okay. And then final question, will the outlot be disturbed?
The outlot will be used for some excess fill. There will be dirt stored on this site. They will regrade that and seed it to prevent erosion or protect from erosion.
So I'm trying to remember in the past if we've put that as condition, because I know we've had some lots around the city that were disturbed that weren't.
We have used it as a condition in the past. In this case, staff was able to catch it early on, so we've got it built into the landscape plan,
Okay.
so the applicant's agreeable to that.
Okay, great. You guys are one step ahead of me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Titan. Commissioner Manhart?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, I had one last question for you that I just thought of. Could you bring up those condition, that slide one more time, please? Condition number 2. Due to the proximity of the roundabout at Nicollet Boulevard and Portland Avenue, and additional access to Outlot A onto Portland Avenue shall not be permitted when the lot is developed. Do we want to say at all?
We certainly can.
I think I think that's better language
Yeah.
that prevents
Jeremy, do you have any
anything.
concerns? We can certainly adjust that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Manhart. Mr. Slania, I have a few questions. Can you point on the roof of the building where the HVAC system will be? I know it will be screened, but can you just point?
At this point, commissioners, the rooftop screening will be located as central as possible so that the parapets do their job in screening it.
Okay.
The applicant hasn't got to the design level of that detail.
Because of the nature of the residence, I think I'm pretty sure that staff and the developer have worked on handicap parking,
Correct.
and that's taken care of, both underground parking as well as
Correct. There are
Above
handicap stalls on both parking surfaces.
delivery trucks. I think Commissioner Manhart asked about those. The entrance would be from Nicollet Boulevard, right? That's
The primary access to the senior site will be from Community Drive.
Community Drive, okay. So where would the vehicles come in? For example, fire truck or sanitation vehicles, where would the entrance would those be?
Everything at this point until until Outlot A is developed, everything service vehicles, employees, residents will all access the site from Community Drive. The service vehicles that are able to will take the driveway into the underground parking for trash or maintenance, what have you. Larger vehicles that cannot make it into the garage do have the turning radiuses to circulate through the site. Certainly, if it's a fire, the fire department may come right in and park right here. Otherwise, they do have the ability to circulate around the site without disturbing this canopy or any other obstructions.
Okay, that answers my question, my concern that I had about the accessibility of these vehicles, make sure they get in and out without causing any problems, so. Okay, those are my questions. Commissioners, any other question for Mr. Slaney? I know there are representatives from the Kraus Anderson Realty and the architects. There are some questions that we need some more answers. Who will take the podium? Please mention your name and address for the records. And welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Eric Reiners from Spirides Reiners Architects. And if I could, I'll just start with some of the questions that were left slightly unanswered. I think Chris did a great job in explaining the project and introducing it. But one of the questions was as to the type of units. We will have one unit within the structure, which will essentially be studio size, like a large hotel room, essentially, that will be designated as a guest unit. So friends or family of permanent residents can have a separate suite where guests can stay. There will be 6 similar units, essentially large studio suites, designated as care suites. Now these are short-term, anywhere from 7 day to 1 to 2 month residents who are in transition from a hip surgery or orthopedic procedure where they can stay and then transition back to home. The balance of the units will be assisted living. And those range from fully ambulatory residents to some non-ambulatory residents, frankly, who do need assisted services. And so hopefully that answers that question. As far as underground parking, it is designated for residents. Some staff may use it on an occasion, but the market studies for assisted living facilities has turned to the point where many residents do still look for facilities where they can park a car or own a car and have it with them. They may or may not use it, but they like to have it. And the overhead door to the garage, underground garage, is 8 feet tall. It's not large enough for garbage trucks to drive inside. The dumpsters from trash and recycling will be rolled outside on trash collection days. You'll see that the entrance drive to the underground level is essentially double wide. It's about 32 or 34 feet wide. The northern half of it goes directly into the underground level. The other part is just staging area for area where the dumpsters can be rolled out for the trash to be collected on trash day. Landscaping to the north. If you look at the landscape plan that's currently on the screen, there's 3 tree symbols due north of our building plan. That particular symbol is a coniferous tree, and so you'll see that those 3, 2 to the northwest and 1 to the northeast, are coniferous, and so the vast majority of those to the north are going to be solid year-round. If we need to adjust some of our plant types to create a denser screen to that parking, we may do so. But as of right now, a vast majority of the plantings intended for that side are coniferous. In addition, the grade change from our ground floor of our facility up to that parking service, as you can see from that one perspective, is almost 1 story. So the largest problem we're going to have is for headlights is coming into level 2 of our building. The retaining wall and earth berm will screen essentially everything to level 1. But there are a good number of year-round cover trees to the north. Did I miss anything?
the septic system, whether you have grinders?
No grinders planned, and that wasn't something that was brought up by staff or as a concern from the city. So that one's a little bit new to me. But again, as Chris pointed out, we don't have a septic system. We're connected directly to city sanitary, and I think the size of our outlets are substantial enough that we're not anticipating any problems. We're also working with the care center directly to the west, and I haven't heard any concerns from that facility either for outlet. And maybe Jeremy could update me on that if engineering has had any problems from the care center or the hospital even. But
None that we know of.
Commissioner Manhart?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a question regarding parking again. How many staff will you be having? Especially, during your peak periods, how many staff will you have on hand?
I gotta be honest. I'm not exactly certain of the total number. Matt? Good, I'm glad. Thank you. Yeah.
Matt, please give us your name and address, too, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Matt Alexander. I'm with Kraus Anderson. We will be the owner, developer, and contractor for this project. To answer your question, back to the grinder question before, a lot of the older cities will have some antiquated systems that kind of problem happens, and I think the city of Burnsville is in a little higher level of technology for that issue. So,
For your information, it was the city of Arden Hills that was
Right.
experiencing the problem.
okay, yeah, I'm not aware of their system, and I've not done
Okay.
a project in Arden Hills, but we're active in other cities doing similar projects, and we've not run across any problems to date.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
and again, what was the question? The
Number of staff during your peak periods?
total number of full-time employees that will be rotating on and off through the day is approximately 20 employees. But those will only have 4 to 8 on staff at any one time during dinner and when we have a lot of food service, and those times would be the peak.
And where will the staff parking be?
Staff parking is a lot of, if there is underground parking available and not being used by residents, I would assume most staff would park down below. If it is being used, then there is enough parking on the surface for staff. That would be, I would assume, along Nicollet Avenue on the south side, furthest from the front door.
Thank you.
Any other questions to Mr. Reynolds? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, this is a public hearing, and I will now open up the meeting for the public hearing. Anyone from the audience who wish to come up and testify on this matter, free to do so. Seeing no one, we close the public hearing. Over to you, commissioners. Mr. Slania? No, Mr. Manhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank the applicant and his team for coming forward with this great proposal. I think it'll be a very much of a centerpiece for that area, and look forward to supporting it. I appreciate their answers to our questions, and I think it'll be a great asset to our community.
Thank you, Commissioner Manhart. Commissioner Tacken?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with Mr. Manhart. It looks like a well-designed building and nice landscaping. The concern I still have is that why parking lot, because I know it would be very annoying for a resident. I realize it looks like it's going in the second floor, but regardless, if cars are turning in all the time, lights will be shining through their windows, and I mean, Y opens up at 5 and closes at 10, so there's a lot of dark hours in there, especially in the wintertime. So I don't think it's to the point where we got to put a condition in there, but I just like staff to maybe really look at that and look that over. And then the conditions, the city staff threw out 75% for item number 1, and I just kind of wondered what other people thought. And then I just wanted some clarification from Mr. Slania that on number 3, you just wanted to remove the 17 spaces?
Correct.
Okay.
If I may, Commissioner, just while we're talking about conditions, I did mention 75%, and the reason that number came up was simply because if you have 50% on Lot 1, Outlot A is developed at 75% green space, your net for the site is 64.
Okay.
I apologize if I failed to mention that before. That was the motivation. While we're talking conditions, condition number 2, we can end the sentence after shall not be permitted, so that we're not talking about when the lot is developed or when it's not. Condition number 3 would be removing the 17 spaces and just leave it as excess of the parking requirements. And finally, certainly staff and the applicant can work on adjusting the landscape plan not only for the future connection, but we can certainly look at the screening from the Y and just take a second look at that.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I guess I'm with that understanding about condition 1. I'm happy with the 75%. And just for clarification too, when an applicant comes to develop that outlot, it'll be a PUD amendment.
It will be.
Okay, so we can renegotiate that if we need to.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Titan. Commissioner Corey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I was kind of playing off of that with the 75%, and maybe it should have been addressed over here, I guess. And maybe you know or maybe you don't, is the use of 75%, is that going to be a barrier to the development of the outlot? Has there been any discussion of that? And if it's negotiable, I mean, we can say 75, 80, and if it's negotiable, it's going to be back at that point in time, and it may be something different. So maybe it's irrelevant now, I'm not sure, but I guess maybe it's more directed over here if us putting that in is a concern for them eventually getting that piece of barren ground developed, what I want to know, is that going to cause a problem in doing that?
No, Commissioners, I think this is a good opportunity to discuss it. I'm sure the council is going to appreciate any comments you have. 75% will be difficult. I wouldn't say it's going to be impossible, but it will be difficult. Looking at Outlot A, staff's viewing it as some type of medical office use, or medical use, I should say, office or clinic or something along those lines. Most likely not a large residential development. Just by zoning, it certainly won't be of a restaurant nature or anything like that. So it is somewhat of a difficult threshold. I guess it just gives us the ability to start somewhere, knowing that that's still 64% for the total. I'm open to comments from the applicant.
Yes, please come up, Mr. Alexander.
My name is Ray Piernan from Fairview Hospitals. I'm representing Fairview Development Company, the overall developer that's subdividing the lot. Ebenezer Senior Housing, which is partnering with KA on the senior housing project, is a division of Fairview. What we're looking at here is subdividing the lot and leaving the outlot for potential, just as Mr. Slania said, a potential medical office building, or even potentially an expansion of the senior housing. We just don't know at this point. We have talked with the developer, Kraus Anderson, who is purchasing the lot number 1, I'll call it, from us, about structuring the lot so it allows us as much flexibility as possible in developing that outlot. We also understand that if it's Fairview that's dealing with that outlot, we have some flexibility in a couple of different areas. One, utilizing some green space elsewhere on the campus, but also we've been successful with a couple of our lead projects in actually utilizing the roof of some of our office buildings for stormwater retention purposes. So we feel relatively comfortable with this. We just can't come to the Planning Commission at this point and say this is what we're going to do. we believe that if we stay within the 2003 plan basic guidelines, we'll have some flexibility as to what we do there. But we did want to preserve, and we appreciate Kraus Anderson and staff's help on the shared parking as well as the access to Community Drive. So we think we'll be able to work with the city on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Titan?
I just wanted to go back to the 75%, and it sounds like the applicant's kind of okay with that. But the 64% was for the site, and they're choosing, not us, to go below that on this first development. So I don't think going below it on the second development, to be nice to them, to allow them to build a bigger building, is in our best interest. 64% is the guidelines. They're using more of it on this first phase. So I wouldn't vote for it if it was anything below 75%.
Thank you, Commissioner Titan. Any other discussions? Commissioner Corey?
I guess
Commissioner Chernan?
are you saying then if there's a proposal to build a medical building, you won't approve it because
No,
there isn't 75% green space?
No, I'm not saying
Right,
that.
okay.
I'm
I'll
saying
just clarify.
for condition one,
Right.
anything below 75%, I wouldn't be
Right.
supportive of, no.
Thanks for that clarification. Okay. Commissioner?
Oh,
Corey?
thank you, Chair. I guess my only concern in what I don't want to do is, and I appreciate your concern about their past agreement, is that something we do tonight that would forestall the ability to develop what is basically going to be an empty, barren lot. And I'm not getting the sense that that would be a problem, and it's all negotiable. I just I don't want to approve something that would cause them to be able to fully explore their options, is all I was concerned about.
Thank you. I gather from the gentleman from Fairview that they're okay with the 75% at this time.
That's what my understanding is. So.
Okay, do I hear a motion to, Commissioner Titan?
I move that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of an application for a preliminary final plat to be known as Arbors 2 and a planned unit development amendment for development stage of a senior housing facility located at the northeast corner of Community Drive and Nicollet Boulevard intersection with the following 5 conditions, and item number 1 should be listed at 75%. Item 2, sentence will end at shall not be permitted, and item 3 will strike 17 spaces.
Moved by Commissioner Titan,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Manhart. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, kindly say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Motion carried 5-0. Thank you very much for coming, and thanks for working so well with staff. We are all impressed by the plans, and building the draft looks very, very nice. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
This will go to the City Council next Tuesday, the 20th of March. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I can keep it. Yep, that'll work. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioners, the next item on the agenda is a discussion, timing of chair and vice chair election. As you read in the minutes, we started discussion at the last meeting. However, we deferred it to this meeting so that we can get input from Commissioner Titan, who was unavoidably absent. This meeting, of course, Commissioner Julich is absent, but he did provide some input at the last meeting. So I think we all know, it's stated very clearly in the minutes, the reason for the item. Normally, election for chair and vice chair is held like weeks or a month after the City Council has appointed new commissioners whenever that's necessary. And sometimes the new commissioners are not fully aware of the work of the commissioners, so to make an informed judgment when they elect the chair and vice chair. I think we're all aware of that, and so I would like to open up now for discussion again. Continue discussion. Mr. Slania, sorry.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, just to recap, I covered this briefly before the meeting, but I think this is important. Two things that are coming into play. One is the length of the commissioner terms, which is back to the City Council for future discussion. I know they'll be tackling that very soon. The second item is the timing of appointment and taking your position for newly appointed commissioners. Applications have always come due in April. That will continue. Interviews in May. That will continue. The council will appoint in June. However, commissioners will not take office or take position until July. So as we're discussing timing, keep in mind new commissioners will be coming in on board in July versus June. And as Commissioner Chair Singh said, we discussed this at the last meeting. If staff can add anything else, let me know.
Commissioner Titan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since I was traveling last meeting and nobody got to hear my thoughts, I'd figured I'd start out tonight. First of all, I watched the meeting online, and so I saw everybody's great comments and suggestions, and it seemed like the meeting was going, or the item was going one way, and then you guys tabled it. So, so kind of my comments about a lot of the discussion around what if the chair ends halfway through their year, and it seemed like we were overly concerned about that, and I think it would be more of a rare event than it would be the norm. In fact, Chair Singh and I served on a commission, and I left halfway through my year as chair, and Mr. Singh was so gracious to fill in the chair for me. And I just kind of wondered how that process went.
I had to be a quick learner, because it was, after we had no signs that you were leaving, and so no one took the time to be your understudy.
Okay.
After you left, I took the position as chair, and all I can say, it was the learning curve for me was a very quick one. I had to do a lot of work, and I assume that with the Planning Commission, people, as you said, it might be a rare occasion when you have newly appointed commissioners who have not served as a commissioner before. I'm not talking about the returning commissioners. That would happen probably very rarely.
Okay.
So,
And Mr. Chair, I mentioned that, and then as you talked about it, I forgot that that commission was set up, a joint commission between two cities, so the vice chair and the chair were from different cities, so the vice chair couldn't take over for the chair. So that was kind of an oddity. Normally, the vice chair could just move up and fulfill that role for the remainder of the term. And it's actually good news what Mr. Slaney talked about, is that we're going to have a month notice before that switchover would happen. So in the rare event that the chair would not be renewed or leave for some reason, we would have a month to prepare for that, and that would allow us to, elevate the vice chair and elect a new vice chair, if that's what the commission wanted, or elect a whole new chair. I'm still in favor of moving it off into the end of the year. I think the last meeting in November was kind of the final discussion for a vote, and then the first meeting in the following year, the chair would take over. I still like it. I still think it gives the new people kind of 6 months or 5 months kind of to figure out who's who on the commission, and make sure they elect a proper chair. I guess that's it. But I mean, I do understand the oddity. What I'm going to call it, the oddity of losing a chair halfway through their tenure.
if we go with what you have just said, that we have said election in December and the new chair and vice chair take office in January, it would mean, for example, my term as chair ends in June. Okay? My term also ends in June. I'm still thinking of whether I will reapply for another term. But let us say that, okay, when my term ends in June, what happens? If the election will be in December, then we will have to elect a chair that would actually serve for 6 months.
And I think that's fine. I mean, I'm sure somebody would step forward and be willing to do that for 6 months.
It's an option,
And once again, you're going to end in,
June.
well, July. You're going to go through June, but you'll know in the beginning of June whether you're going to be there in July.
Yep.
I mean, it's a one-time 6-month fill-in for somebody
Well, it can also happen if a
if a commissioner leaves.
chair or the vice chair leaves for.
And to me, that would be the vice chair moves up into the chair position, and
No, it's not a given.
right, you're right.
It will be an option again.
But at least that's somebody that will hopefully have experience.
Commissioner Corey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I was going to comment on the option. To me, obviously, one option would be the vice chair would move up into the chair for that 6 months, and then you could just vote on a vice chair for that 6 months till January again. That would, that'd be one option. Then you'd have continuity as to the leadership.
I mean, that's another option, but if I were the vice chair and I would be taking the chair for 6 months, that rules me out for re-election next year.
You're right.
True.
That's true.
I don't know, can we just have an open discussion here?
Sure, I
Okay,
think that's what
all
we're
right.
doing right now.
I just don't want to violate rules of order. Once again, that's a rare thing, and I know commissioners have left midterm before. In fact, the previous set of commissioners, there was a couple that kind of came in the middle of winter. So it's rare. It does happen. I think it's good to acknowledge that it does happen, but for the most part, it has that cycle where, people are here for a while. And once again, you'd still have a month of seasoned commissioners that would be voting on the next person in that rare event.
Has there been scandal over chairs of a commission that weren't qualified or somehow were voted in because newly appointed commissioners didn't know what they were doing and made rash decisions to put their friend as on the chair?
No, I don't think Commissioner.
I'm just curious. I mean, you never know.
I'm not knowledgeable of any scandal. What I do know is that when I came on board, I had like 2 weeks within which to vote for a chair and vice chair. And, it would have been nice if I had gotten a month. But now we are getting the option of a month, which I see is a big improvement. The appointment is made, and after 1 month, the election. So at least it gives you a couple of meetings, if I might say that. Sometimes we don't have 2 meetings a month, but let's say we have 2 meetings for a month. It gives us 2 meetings to be more informed when we have the election.
Yeah, I will say the only thing that I knew coming in as a new commissioner was that I wasn't going to vote for Commissioner Corey to be the chair. Everybody else I knew had been on the commission for multiple terms. And thinking back on the first commission meeting, I was just as I was learning as much about the issues that were being presented, much less who was doing an excellent job trying to run the meeting out of all the sitting commissioners that were trying to be the chair. So I guess for all the potential or for all the help that having an extra meeting might have, and I just think the simplicity of matching your service as chair versus your service on the commission outweighs the potential for all these overlaps and potential conflicts. Again, they might be minor, But I guess I don't really see the value in changing how things are being done, unless the benefit outweighs the cost. And I guess I'm just not seeing
Yeah.
if that really is the case or not.
If we change it to the November/December to the January, it seems to me that, because if I remember right, the rule is you can only serve for 1 year. So some head is going to have to do just 6 months. There's just no
Yeah,
way
that's,
around it.
that is, as I said earlier, that's an option.
Right.
So,
Can't get around it.
is the election going to change date since we're changing the appointment date?
I'm sorry.
So the election of the chair, is that going to happen the first meeting in July now?
Yeah, just, in this situation, maybe Commissioner Singh, should he stay on, maybe he does 13 months instead of 12 this first year to fill in the gap, but,
But do the rules permit that? You can
well,
only serve as chair for a year.
yeah,
You
correct.
have to be reappointed. Having a month grace period might not be something that the commissioner of the city council is permitted to.
It's the bylaws of the planning commission.
Of the of the plan. So it would violate the bylaws of the planning commission to have that type of turnover. But what we would know is if it's, let's say, and I don't know whose terms are ending aside from Commissioner Singh, but assuming your term ends,
June 30th.
Yeah, mine
and yours, so there'll be 2 vacancies. So there'll be 2 new people.
potentially.
Right. Potentially. Right. I'm sorry. Potentially. Let's just assume that's the case. In all likelihood, there will be a discussion. At least I certainly wouldn't attempt to serve as chair because I've only been on the commission for a year. I would presume that there'd be a discussion between Commissioner Julich and Commissioner Manhart over who would be the chair, given the fact that they've had the most experience on the commission. And in fact, Commissioner Manhart is the vice chair, so I would certainly support him to be the chair, should he be interested. Because of that, I would think that that's typically how the discussion goes at the first meeting of the Planning Commission in July. Is that
Correct.
fair, safe to say?
Safe to say. Okay, I think I'm trying to get the feeling of commissioners, and what I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm wrong, that we feel comfortable keeping the same system that we have now. That the election is held 1 month before the new commissioner. Elections are held 1 month after the new commissioners have been appointed.
I believe that's correct.
Are we comfortable with that?
I think so.
Do we need a motion?
If I could, just a very brief that the officers be officer election take place the month following council or commissioner appointments. You can do that. Let's take action on that first, if the commissioners don't mind.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Titan and seconded by
I'll second it.
Commissioner Corey. Okay. Any discussion? Any more discussion on it? All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? 5-0.
And then, commissioners, while we're on the subject, we can certainly discuss Commissioner Singh or Chair Singh will be ending June 30th. There's going to be July where there isn't a chair.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if we can make a motion to waive our bylaws for that month to allow you to continue to be,
I'll be happy with that.
I mean,
I'll be happy to
is that,
serve for that 1
is
month.
that allowable?
They're not.
But would we be waiving? But we would not only be waiving the bylaws for period of service for the chair, but period of service for a commissioner. Is that right?
No.
Potential.
Oh, because I thought in the mind,
No,
that
potentially.
your service as on the commission ends
My
June
term ends
30th.
June 30th.
So there would be a month where we would have an extra commissioner.
But I think we
No,
need to,
we
we need
want-
to cross that bridge when it comes to that.
That's a
Right.
good-
No, I assume, right, and that's of course under the assumption that,
And
you
if
know
that
what I
were the
mean.
case, then the vice chair would serve
Serve.
as.
That's what I'm saying. I guess that's what
Yeah, what-
there already is a procedure in place.
Yes.
If there isn't a sitting commissioner, the vice chair serves as the chair.
But
My-
that's 1 month more.
My understanding, though, is the city council moved the commission end date to the end of June. So they're gonna appoint beginning of June, and they moved this 1 year, everybody's end date back to June 30th. And then the first meeting in July will be the new commissioners, and that would be the election night also.
Right. So you wouldn't need.
Then we don't need to have the waiver.
Yeah, we do, because his term ends, well,
June 30th.
no, the 1st of June, because that's when you were appointed.
No, June 30th.
Oh, I thought it was June 30th.
The new commissioners will be effective July 1.
Yeah.
But we elected Chair Singh on our first meeting in June.
That's because it was a month earlier.
Right. So his 12 months will end that first meeting in June.
But is the term of service defined specifically by
Correct.
the number of months or by the term from
Just say-
the first meeting of the new commission until the last meeting?
1 year. It doesn't say months. You know, that's a good point. We can
If it's
we can deal with
12 months, then, yeah.
we can deal with that July 1st when we know who's
would-
been reappointed
Okay.
or reappointed or newly appointed,
Yeah.
and
Okay, my term ends, say 6/2012. So
6/20.
that's 6,
So that would be the last.
At the end of
That
June.
would be the last
So the
meeting
last
of the
meeting.
commission.
Yeah, yeah.
Commission's
Well,
second meeting in
but
June.
before it was the first meeting in June. That's when typical appointments happened.
It seems to be.
I know, but our
in-
first
you and I are the
meeting-
same, we go
Yeah.
up to the end of June.
But our first meeting wasn't until that middle end of June.
Yeah.
Commissioners, I think what we got in place now will will work. We can deal with the 2 meeting gap when it happens. Maybe we only have 1 meeting in that time, or who knows what could happen. But this way, as staff and the commission move forward, the officers will be elected. Will be elected, and when we should say take office the month following the appointments.
I think that, yeah.
And just another comment, somebody asked about my term. I'll be ending my first term this year, so
Yeah.
I'm still eligible for another term.
You and I are in the same thing. Okay, are we through with the discussion? Item 4?
Thank you, commissioners. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your discussion. We have settled that. Item 5 on the agenda for March 26th Planning Commission meeting, which was distributed. And Planning Commission updates. Any updates from commissioners? Any updates?
None.
Everybody's doing well? Great.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Commissioner Tyken mentioned this. The Tires Plus site, equipment has been mobilized over at Town and Country Shopping Center. So hopefully we'll see that construction happen very, very soon.
Okay, before we adjourn, just to remind members that the next scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission is Monday, March 26, 2012 at 6:30 p.m. For the viewing and listening audience, thank you for joining us. Commissioners and staff, thank you. Need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Manhart,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Corey. All in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned.